And so I think in the big picture, there'll be more and more pressure on gold moving up simply from a supply demand type of situation.
Hey everyone, this is Elijah K. Johnson with the Miles Franklin Market Update. And with us today is Kelvin Burton, the Investors Relations Person of American Creek Resources. They're a junior exploration company, and we're happy to have them on today because they're actually a company that the Schectmans, Andy Schectman and David Schectman of Miles Franklin, have invested in. So Kelvin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey Elijah, it's great to be here. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Now, I wanted to touch on kind of where we've been since we last talked a few months ago. We saw quite a big rally in precious metals into the end of the year, going into the beginning of 2021. And then we've seen quite a bit of a pullback. Gold is down about $100 or so. What do you make of what's happening in the precious metals right now?
Sure. Well, I think it's obvious to everyone that since, going into the fall, right, the gold started to pull back, and it seemed like a natural thing and something that people had been predicting. And I think we're still in that. If you look at a lot of the technical charts, we're right around the level where it should be getting a lot more support. And I'm in the camp with a lot of people, I suppose, where we look at this as a short-term thing, and that there's a bright future for gold here in 2021. There's just too many big picture things that are supporting gold. It's interesting. I just heard an interview from Bubba Horowitz, and he was saying, for people who are in it long term, don't let the daily noise and get to you and throw you off course. You just stick with it long run, because that's what happens. You mentioned we're off, $100. Nowadays, that can happen in a day. It was actually a few years back that Jim Sinclair was saying, someday we're going to see gold swing $100 in one trading day. And we're thinking, wow, that's, we've seen that before now, and we're starting to see it more commonly. And so, yes, there is a bit of a roller coaster ride in gold, but we have to put that into the perspective of a long bull run. And we don't want to get bucked off. As actually Andy Schectman quoted that a little while ago about hanging on by your fingertips, right? And that's what it takes in a bull run. You do have to be able to ride the bull. So big picture, I see it continuing to rise in this coming year. One of the interesting things about kind of a longer term perspective, Elijah, with gold is something that a lot of people maybe aren't necessarily aware of, and that is the supply of gold that's coming out. So outside of, whether we're in peak production or not, obviously producers right now are trying to produce as much as they possibly can, because they're making more money than they ever have before with this big rise that we had earlier in 2020. But one of the issues is that they're chewing through a lot of the reserves that are in the ground, and those aren't being replaced near as fast as what they're being consumed. And so this is actually an issue within gold, where the world isn't about to get flooded with gold anytime soon. The projects are getting more distant. A lot of them are more remote. They're lower grade. They're in higher political risk areas, these types of things. And so it's not going to keep up. And so I think in the big picture, there'll be more and more pressure on gold moving up simply from a supply demand type of situation. And one of the areas within that is a lot of the projects, instead of being mega projects that are generational in size, they're not. They're kind of down to a decade in size. So a lot of new projects coming on, they'll range between 7 to 12 years typically. And then you're off to find another one, right? And you have to have all the capex for another one and another one and another one. And obviously these big mining companies, they want to be able to have their resources in place for a long ways out. And so these what I would call a generational deposit. They're becoming extremely rare, and there aren't a lot of them out there. And as I think we've mentioned before, or talked about before, is that a lot of them are in, AK-47 jurisdictions, and a lot of them are in environmentally sensitive areas, or they're just in areas that don't have a lot of infrastructure. And so the capex required to get them up and running is tremendous, and it takes a long time. So we're fortunate, and we can talk about it a little bit later about the position that we're in with one of the projects we have of being one of those. But I think that's important for people who have invested in gold physically and anything else in gold, whether it be in companies and so forth, is that it is a rare product, and it's going to become more rare because demand's going to go up and supply, I believe, will go down.
You're talking about how there could be this shortage coming because of essentially that there are mines that really, they're becoming scarce, that have a lot of gold in them. And one of the things that we saw in 2020, and we talked about on our last interview, is also that mines were shut down for a little while in some places because of COVID. And now we're seeing, again, a rise of COVID. We're seeing a new strain, a variant of COVID come out that seems to be more contagious. And, we're seeing renewed shutdowns. What is your thought on how that might impact the mining industry again?
Sure. Well, it's obviously had a real impact this last year. Fortunately, mining has been deemed an essential service. So unlike some other industries, we don't just shut completely down, but it has affected things. When things first started happening in the spring, a lot of companies were shut down, and it's a ripple effect, right? From the production to the transportation to the processing of it, and then all the way through out to the banks and other holders who hold gold. So I believe that the production from 2020 is down 1.7%. A lot of big companies especially were able to put systems in place to be able to try and protect their employees and still be able to run on schedules that are pretty efficient. They obviously haven't caught up. There actually is a gap there, and that may happen in this year as well with different strains of COVID and so forth. Obviously, everyone's hoping that if they get a shot in the arm, that's going to fix everything. I don't know if it will or not. Obviously, the less they have production, the more demand there is, and it will affect prices going up. I would like to mention how, going back to this other concept of discovery, and that's how it's affected the world that I'm in, and that's in the world of exploration for gold. And that really has had an effect. There's been a lot of companies this year who planned exploration projects, and either they didn't get off the ground, or they were delayed, or they didn't get in as a big a season. We do, depending on what part of the world you're in, you obviously have seasons, some places don't. But I do know of a lot of programs that were either reduced or shut down early and everything else. And as that affects the people looking for the gold and proving up the gold for the producers, it adds a lag time there as well. So I do think that it will affect gold, short-term and long-term. Fortunately for us, we were able to have a program run where we didn't have to shut down. And so we actually ended up with a really good program on our property called Treaty Creek up in the BC's Golden Triangle.
Definitely. And I'd like to discuss that project, Treaty Creek. One clarification just about what you said. You said that mining was deemed an essential service. Now that was in Canada, correct? But even so, you're saying things still kind of slowed down a bit?
Right. So yes, I am in Canada, and our projects are in British Columbia on the west coast of Canada. And in Canada, mining is deemed as an essential service, and so it's all the way through the chain. So producers are kind of at one end of the chain, and we're at the other end of the chain, and all the way through, everything associated with it is an essential service. And so it's more a matter of implementing regulations and safety codes and everything else that we can do to keep everyone safe and keep everything running as smoothly as we can, opposed to it's just shut down like so many other businesses are. That's obviously going to vary around the world. So how much COVID affects gold production is going to depend on each country individually.
Definitely. And getting back to your project, the American Creek project, Treaty Creek, I know we discussed this in our last interview, and yeah, I'd love you to give us an update on that.
Sure, I'd love to. Treaty Creek is kind of a unique project. There's a lot of companies and a lot of projects that are out there, and what makes this one unique is that it has the potential to be a generational type of deposit where a mining company can mine it for a long time, and that's becoming quite significant these days. I should mention right off the top, though, that it is a joint venture. And so the operator of the project is Tudor Gold, and we have a 20% fully carried interest in the project. That means that we don't have to spend any money while this is being taken and being developed, but we still get to retain our 20%. So that's 20% of the project, not of Tudor Gold. And there's another company called Teton Resources that are also involved in it. And it's found up in the BC's Golden Triangle. This is a very hot area of the world. There's recent mines that have just been put into production, and there's a lot of mines moving, or not mines, but projects moving towards becoming mines in that area. And one of them that's probably the best known one is called Seabridge Gold. Now, there's an image that I had sent to you there, so if you don't mind putting that up here. There's a geological term called a hydrothermal system. That means that the system was created underwater, and this was part of an island arc chain at one point, similar to what's coming off of the coast of Alaska right now. And in this system, it's very large. It extends about 20 kilometers or so. And like other very large systems, it has a sequence or a rhythm to it. And in this case, if you look at this image here, you will see Seabridge Gold is outlined in blue, Treaty Creek outlined in white, and Pretium Resources is outlined in green. And at the bottom of the system, you'll see the Bruce Jack mine there. And so that one just went into production a couple of years ago. And something I should mention about that system or that deposit there is that one of the key players in developing that project is Ken Conkin. And he was the head geologist for Pretium in developing that and putting it into production. And then Ken retired. He kind of won the Super Bowl of mining, and he retired. And then he started to see what was on Treaty Creek, and I'll talk to you about that in just a second. But Ken is involved in developing Treaty Creek. And I should mention one other gentleman, and that's Walter Storm, who's the president of Tudor Gold. And he was actually one of the main financiers and heavily involved in Osisko's Malartic mine a decade ago. And that one actually is Canada's largest producer of gold right now. And so this is the kind of scale of deposits that these guys are used to working on, and they're working together now to be able to develop Treaty Creek. So if we start at the bottom, we'll see the Bruce Jack mine, and then and these deposits are outlined in yellow, and we'll see the Kerr, then the Sulphurets, the Mitchell, and the Snowfield, and then just above that is the Iron Cap, and those are all part of Seabridge. Now, as you can see here, Seabridge has proven and probable reserves of 38 million ounces. That's the largest undeveloped gold deposit by reserves in the entire world. That's the kind of scale we're talking about. And then each of these deposits are roughly about 2.5 kilometers apart. And then if you take that again and go across the line into Treaty Creek, you'll see something called the perfect storm. Now, the perfect storm looks like another mega deposit like these other ones. And because of permitting issues, we weren't able to drill much of it this year. The 3 initial holes right on the very edge of it were drilled and had great success with that. And then Goldstorm is the one that I'm going to focus on. I guess as far as Perfect Storm goes, it has the potential to be another big deposit, but we're focusing on Goldstorm right now. And so I've given you another image here that maybe if you could put up for me here, and includes some of the drill holes that have been on there. So this year, Tudor was able to drill 45,600 meters. That's just an incredible number on this. And I will mention that they had their very first hole since starting to drill in 2016 where they didn't actually find something that they were targeting. Every time they drill, they hit what they're targeting type of thing. Yes, there are lost holes, but as far as completed holes go, it's just incredibly consistent and a very successful program. I threw together about 10 or so drill holes here. The reason why I picked these ones, Elijah, is if you see there's a picture of Toronto down on the bottom there, and you can see how the CN Tower just dwarfs everything else around it. And the CN Tower is 553 meters tall. And each one of these intervals that I've listed here have close to a 1 gram per ton gold equivalent interval that's around the same height as the CN Tower is there, which is just phenomenal. And two of them that I'd just like to highlight really quickly here, they just came out for the last results of the year. So the program is over. They'll be starting up again in the spring. And that's holes 91 and 92 there. So in hole 91, there's just under 1 gram gold equivalent. It's 0.86 grams per ton gold over 1,033 meters. So that's essentially twice the height of the CN Tower. And within that, starting close to surface, is 532 meters of 1.1 gram per ton gold equivalent. So if you look down the list, you'll notice that these enriched areas, they actually start close to surface, which is quite significant. The next hole here, 92, that one is about 1 gram per ton gold over 531 meters. Again, about the height of the CN Tower of 1 gram per ton gold, and then 3.3 grams per ton gold over about 82 meters. So a very rich zone there. And maybe I should explain what that zone is. So it's called the 300 zone, and it starts close to surface and goes down around 300 meters. So it got that name. That's where a lot of the really enriched mineralization is in this, and that's a critical area for having an open pit type of design, which is what they're aiming for on this deposit. Is you can get out the richest stuff first, and open pit is the cheapest type of mining, and so it's very good logistics in that way. Speaking of logistics, it also happens to be only about 20 kilometers from the highway, and from the highway, it's only an hour and a half down to a shipping port that already ships bulk tonnage ore around the world for other mines. And so incredibly good logistics there. There's also a high transmission power line that runs right up the highway, specifically to power projects like this one. So the significance of the deposit is that it has this potential to become something very similar to what Seabridge has. The difference is we're on the right side of the mountain. We're right close to the highway and the power and everything else, so we don't have to build tunnels and a lot of infrastructure to get it out. And as far as a resource calculation is concerned, that's a very significant part of when to invest in a company. And we're expecting a resource calculation to come out on that in the next few months. And I can't tell you what it'll be because no one really knows, but we guess that it will certainly be within a profitable grade and that it will be a very significant and a world-class one like the other ones are in this area.
And that's kind of one of the things you're mentioning is that at the beginning of the interview, you're talking about how it's becoming more and more scarce to have a lot of gold in the ground. But it seems like American Creek, if you wanted to kind of share a bit more about that, you said that American Creek is very fortunate in that area.
Well, we are. We actually have a couple projects in that area. So it's, again, a very, very rich area. Most of the exploration dollars in British Columbia are going right into that area, a very significant portion. And it is because they call it elephant country, right? And it's because there are a lot of big deposits. There's also actually some very high grade deposits there. One of the richest mines in the world was Eskay Creek, which is only about 14 kilometers away from Treaty Creek. It was a VMS system owned by Barrick, and it was the highest silver content as far as a mine's ever been, and very high in gold as well. So there's all types of different systems there. But Treaty Creek really does have the potential to be a generational deposit. And as I mentioned, it's a joint venture. And so what we found is it was overshadowing all of our other projects. And so we have a lot of other great projects, both within the Golden Triangle and throughout BC. And we just weren't getting any value for them, even though we were running great programs on them. And the other reality is that at some point this will be sold to a big player. It takes a very big player to run this type of thing. And what we didn't want to have happen is have someone come in and buy the company and take all the other projects with it. And so what we've done is we've split the company in two. The new company is called Stinger Resources, and it has taken all but two of our projects. So we have the Ostrich Bonanza left in American Creek, and we have Treaty Creek left in American Creek. We've taken our other projects and put them into Stinger Resources. And the way that will work is any investor who's invested in American Creek will automatically get shares in the new company. So they can buy more if they want, but they get the same pro rata type of percentage as they had in American Creek with the new company. And that should start trading any time now. We're just waiting to hear back from the exchange, from the venture exchange, Toronto Stock Exchange, which is where it'll be trading. And hopefully that will be up and trading sometime soon. So it's a benefit for all American Creek shareholders because they will benefit in both of them. And then having those other projects in a second company, they can kind of fly on their own and be detached from Treaty Creek.
One of the interesting things about investing in the precious metal sector is that the physical metal is, Andy Schectman often talks about it as being wealth, right? It's kind of you put your money there to really at this point think about return of your wealth instead of return on your wealth. It's a safe haven asset. Now, when it comes to mining shares, what is your perspective on that? Is that more of an asset or is that an investment? And how do mining stocks often trade when precious metals go higher?
Sure. So I've often heard it referred to as a whip in your hand. And gold, I suppose gold would be your shoulder. It doesn't have to move much at all. And it's pretty solid. It's pretty attached. And as you crack a whip, what happens is the further you go down your arm and out the whip, the greater fluctuations that you have. And so maybe gold producing companies, they have more volatility than say gold does. But their volatility isn't as great, so you can't make as much money on. They're more kind of a stable thing where you're looking for a dividend or that type of thing. And then as you move further down out towards exploration, then obviously the highs are higher and the lows are lower, which is why it's really important to do your homework and to invest in the right company. Yes, the tide can come in and the tide can go out, but you want to be on the right boat as well. And we really believe that we have the right boat with both companies. And so maybe what I'll do is I'll just refer to what David Schectman has said, and that is that, as everyone knows, he's a physical gold guy, and he invested in American Creek because he has a price point where he thinks it's going to increase in value significantly, and then there's a certain price point that he has. He won't tell anyone what it is. And he's going to pull his money back out, and then he's going to buy more gold with it. So that's okay, right? It's actually a pretty good strategy to use because the one has the potential to rise much quicker in a strong bull market. And I should also mention that within the exploration cycle or stage, a really critical time is when you're starting to actually put ounces in the ground, and that's when you come out with a resource calculation. And so we think that'll be very, very significant for us when that comes out, because then you're included in all the different publications and everything else, and people are more comfortable writing about you and talking about you because you can say we have X number of ounces in the ground, and you're now part of the conversation. So in terms of timing along exploration, we're actually at a really good point for timing to get involved with a company that potentially has the ability to come up with a world scale type of deposit.
Before we let you go, Kelvin, I just wanted to address one more topic. You're a subsidiary of American Creek, Stinger Resources, if you wanted to kind of give us an update on that.
Sure. So what that looks like is, as I mentioned, we have projects all over BC, and we have more that are in the Golden Triangle. So the qualifying project for that company is called the Dunwell Mine. And the dunwell mine is in the Golden Triangle. In fact, it's literally right by the shipping port in the town of Stewart, BC. It's, as far as logistics go, it's hard to beat. It's only 8 kilometers out of town. 6 kilometers that is on the highway coming into the town. There's only one road in and one road out. And then it goes up to a little place called Hyder, Alaska. There's only one way in and out. And so our project is literally right beside the town. It's 2 kilometers off the highway to get to the adit. So that's about 15 minutes to get to the shipping port. And it's a different one than what Treaty Creek is. So in this case, it's called a polymetallic type of deposit where you have lead, zinc, silver, gold, some copper, and it's very high grade. So past producing, it was about close to six grams or so gold, and then close to equivalent of that in your silver. It's very rich in silver, and your lead and your zinc. And it's an old mine. It was never a big producing one. It was a small producing one that was shut down during World War II. And over the last quite a number of years, we've been able to accumulate quite a decent land package in that area. And we are able to do a lot of really good geophysics on it in the last year or two. And so our plan is to be able to start going with that program once we get Stinger up and trading on its own. So that'll be one of the flagships. Another flagship will be down in the East Kootenays of BC. It's called Gold Hill. We believe it to be the primary source of Canada's 4th largest placer deposit in history. So it's not a placer mine, it's where the source is for it. And so that's just kind of a taste of 2 of the main projects for that. We have some other ones as well. And we really believe that we have some great company makers in there. And what we'll do, Elijah, is as soon as we get the information from the TSX Venture, we'll put out a press release, and that will tell everyone, how long you can buy American Creek shares for and still get Stinger shares, and when it'll start trading and what the ticker will be, and those types of things. Definitely.
Well, Kelvin Burton, thank you so much for joining us today. Before we let you go, did you want to share with the viewers any last thoughts you had and where people can find you online?
Sure. Well, we're at americancreek.com, and it's when you look at going back to another expert in the field here, and that's Ronnie Stoffele out of Germany. He writes for Incrementum and the Gold Report that everyone reads. And one of his main premises is that gold price is heavily influenced by uncertainty. And I think it's obvious to see we have a lot of that right now in the world. And so even though we have these fluctuations where gold's going up and down like a buck and bull, don't get thrown off. Look at the long-term picture. Do your homework, whether it's us or any other company. Invest in gold. Make sure that you have your physical stuff under your pillow or safely secured by Miles Franklin. And then if you want to invest in something that has the potential to go up significantly, just like we did last year, I invite you to take a look at American Creek Resources as one of the companies that you would invest in.
Kelvin Burton, thank you so much, and God bless.
All right, take care.